I'm Charles Galda, your host for the Church in Action. Welcome to part 2. So as part of that rebirthing process, we heard a number of things that were really important. So we're saying now we're trying to serve you, the church, so that becomes important to us. It's not just stuff we hear. And so what they said is, don't come up with new things for me to do. I've got enough to do as it is. Help me do the things I need to get done. So that's one. And it very much informs the work we do. They said, we don't think evangelism is best done in the big events of yesteryear. That's not to say that God can't work in any way he wants to. And there are people who still do those things. And some of them are great partners of ours and we love them and support them. It's just not where we focus our time. We heard, help us do the things we can do better together that we can't do on our own, like addiction, mental health, racial healing, disability, all the big issues that beset our community, and help us be friends across the normal divides of the church so we can know each other and learn from each other. And it took me a while to put in theological terms what they were saying, because I'm a corporate guy and I'm just like, okay, so I can execute on that. I know what you just asked for. And then eventually you start to realize and say, oh, wait a minute, we're talking about unity here. That's what we're talking about. And right. And we're talking about justice over here. But in order to do that, we really realize that we're not structured right from a governance perspective. And I wanted to make sure there was really always a tight accountability to the notion that we're serving the church, not the church is serving us. And so we rewrote the bylaws and we took a role that used to exist called regional advisor. And we changed the name of it because it was not about advice. It was about directing our work. And so we called those people association directors. And we have 120, 130 of them at any given time. And they'll come together at least once a year. And they're the people who direct our work. They're a proxy for the big church. And they answer. So it's really important that group be diverse and urban and rural and Black and white and Latino and Asian and big church, small church, parachurch, marketplace, right? To be as diverse as possible, because they're a proxy for the big C church, answering what is God doing through you and how can we help? And then to make sure it doesn't just ever become advice, they then elect the board of directors, who is then tasked with figuring out how to do it. They do that by hiring me and the team we have at Vision New England. And so I always make real clear to folks, so if the association directors say they want A, and I decide I'm smarter than everybody else in the room and we're going to do B, and the board doesn't fire me, they can fire the board because we want to serve the church. And so, and that's why the board changed to be much more, so now the board is more representative of the association directors, so that we maintain that proxy concept of when we're talking with our board, we're talking with the association directors, we are hearing voices from all over the church, not just certain segments of the church or strains of the church. And so that's really turned out. We've got an amazing board, way better than a small nonprofit of our size should have. But it's you're on our board. It's an amazing board. And so that's we do that. And so that really led us to a new vision statement that says really what's always knit us together and what still does today is there's about 1,000 plus ministries involved in Vision New England, some way, shape, or form. And what knits us together is we want to see New England transform with the love of Jesus. And our mission in that is accelerating evangelism. You played a big role in helping craft this language. And the way we accelerate evangelism is we help the church work in unity to make disciples and do justice and share Jesus. And I say those, and I pause after each one because now I want to go in and fill in a little bit. So we help the church work in unity because Jesus says when they are one like you and I are one, he prays for unity in John 17. When they're one like you and I are one, deep, intimate, Trinitarian-like friendship and love, right? When they are one like you and I are one, then people will know God sent his son. So when we manifest unity at the events we do, and we can talk about those events too, when we manifest that unity, there's something evangelistic going on, even if we can't see it. Yeah. And there's also a power in that unity because when we find over and over again is when we come together and we start making those kinds of friendships, suddenly God's doing stuff with those relationships nobody predicted. Mm-hmm. So we want to help the church work in unity, which is evangelistic, to make disciples, which are people. I have a new. I've been saying a disciple is somebody like Jesus. I fleshed that out, and when I say I fleshed that out, I mean I heard somebody else flesh that out, and I've stolen it from them.
That's wisdom.
But a disciple is someone who has decided that and I won't get the language exactly right, that they want more than anything else in life to become like Jesus. And they have decided to do what is necessary for that to happen. And they have reordered their lives, rearranged their affairs, is the way the person said it, rearranged their affairs to ensure that outcome happens. Meaning they put spiritual disciplines or spiritual practices first in their life, because that's how you pursue God that way. And that creates people. God uses that to create people who are like his son, who naturally disadvantage themselves to do good for other people. And so when we make people like that, those are people who are willing to be in unity, because there's a cost to unity, right? I can't have people agree with everything I say. It might cost me time. It might cost me money, right? So you need to make disciples if you want to have that unity. So we're helping the church work in unity to make disciples, because we also need to learn from each other, because the church is not good at this, and we're working through that, and do justice. And I would argue, again, without disciples, you're not getting people who are willing to do justice. And we don't mean some political agenda of justice. We mean what Jesus talked about, and which I like to encapsulate as fixing what's broken and missing in our communities. I want to bless our communities. And so, but again, I have to disadvantage myself to do good in my community to do that. So you have to have disciples do that. And Jesus tells us what happens when that happens. Matthew 5:16, the world will see and praise your Father in heaven. And now with those things in place, sharing Jesus becomes not only more natural, but a lot more effective. Yeah. And that's the most effective evangelism today, is when you and I know each other. When I always say, when I miss my mortgage payment so you can make yours, you want to know why that is. And we have tons of churches and people in our network who will tell the story about, there's a church over near UMass, right on the border of UMass Amherst, not the most pro-Christian context you can imagine, but the college radio station invited the pastor on to ask him, why does his church do all these things in their community? And so what have they asked him to do? They've asked him to come tell them about Jesus, and that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's really cool to hear how kind of over time, as the world evolves, our kind of the church's reputation and relationships with the community change. But the church is just, and our network across New England has just responded and evolved to be like, all right, how do we best serve Jesus in our communities? How do we best share Jesus? And that's changed a lot over time. And I think it's pretty cool to hear too how for Vision New England to kind of reflect and restructure, even on the most, basic level of restructuring how we operate, kind of revising our mission statement so that we can maintain the heart of who we have always been and continue to do it effectively in different ways in different seasons. It's pretty cool.
Just like you do in your church, the fundamentals haven't changed, but our methods need to. And we don't always like that, even that our methods have to change, because people don't like change. New England people really don't like change. And Christian New England people aren't changing anything. But the reality is, and it's just like Congress, we can grieve the absence of that way, but it needs to change, because we're in a very different context than we were even 20 years ago. And I think everybody knows that. And so to assume that the same methods will work is crazy. But to assume the same principles is what we're all about.
Right. Yeah. If something's alive, if something's growing, it's changing. And that's kind of the process. So Charles, is there anything else that you want to add about what we do today? I know you mentioned kind of events and things that we do today as a kind of the outflow of that mission.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We do, in a typical year, we'll do more than 60 events. Some are in person, some are virtual. Some are as small as 5 people. Some are as big as 700 people. It really is a broad thing. And we don't view 5 as a defect. We think, I'm a big fan of Dallas Willard, who says, you go with who goes. And so if 5 people come to that, that's exactly who God wanted to be there. And sometimes the constituency is just a small constituency, but it's still an important one. And so we have about 25 affinity groups, we call them, or networks, or just groups that are typically role-based. And so we have a group for large church pastors, medium-sized church pastors, small church pastors, discipleship pastors, missions pastors, worship leaders, women in Christian leadership, all whatever early career pastors, and they'll come together anywhere from 1 to 4 or 5 times a year. Again, in person or virtual, sometimes for a day, sometimes multiple days, sometimes multiple days, multiple times. Right? It's each group defines their own agenda, and they also and there's some things that all have in common, but there's not a standard template that this is what's going to happen every time. And so what they have in common is always a subset of that group who defines what we want to talk about this year, what's relevant to us. So I'll joke with folks, I have views on what large church pastors should talk about, but I'm not a large church pastor. What do I know? And why should they listen to me? And so they decide each group decides this is the most pressing stuff we want to be talking about. And then they'll come together, and that might be they bring in a guest speaker. And that's where folks like Gordon MacDonald still play a big role with us. It could be Steve Macchia still plays a big role with us and doing events with us. But it could be any number of people. We've had Fuller people, we've had YWAM people, we've had Urbana, right? All kinds of different people, and tons of New England people, because New England's a different context. So there are times where we're going outside New England. The bulk of them are probably inside New England, and they'll come together, and there's usually some aspect of learning. But that learning may also be peer learning, that I want to hear from my peers on this. Who's seeing this? How are you reacting to this? And so there's a lot of that kind of peer learning, but also expert learning from outside. But what's really happening is they're making friends, and that's what you see over and over again. And some of these guys who've been doing that same group for a long time are very good friends and go away on their own together. So they'll go to 4 events a year with us, and then they'll do 2 other events with just 4 of them or something, which is exactly what we want to say, because that's the unity Jesus prayed for. And so we'll deal with issues like homelessness, affordable housing, gentrification. We'll deal with sexuality. We'll deal with next gen, right? How you reach out and empower the next generation. And so we do a whole bunch of our own events around those things. But then we have a lot of partners where we'll do events with them. So the Black Ministerial Alliance 10 Point in Boston is a great partner of ours. We love them, and have done all kinds of things together, whether it's COVID clinics, outreach days, pastor support, just food support, fundraising together. They gave us an award. It's one of the best ones I have in my office for the work we did together one year, and they're just one. The whole BMA organization that we work with is just wonderful. I'm on a call with a bunch of pastors every Tuesday morning. It's one of the most helpful things in all of our ministries, I think, that is hosted by the BMA. We've done events with Copani, which is the Latino Pastors Network. We do work with a partner network up in Portland, Maine, where there's the highest concentration we know of Congolese and Angolan immigrant pastors who are up there, and we do training events with them. We do events with networks like what we call Thrive Cape Cod. We consider to be one of the networks we work with, which is a group of pastors down on the Cape who've been coming together for 7+. I think we're on our 8th year, actually, of coming together just to come together and be in unity, to worship together, and then spend a day figuring out how we collaborate together in unity to meet the needs of our communities. That's where we're dealing with some of those topics that I was mentioning before. We have another group like that, Thrive Farmington Valley. We just had our event there, and it was a great couple of days, but it's the same model there. It's, let's worship together as one, 24 churches this year in Thrive Farmington Valley. Cape's anywhere between 30 and 40 churches coming together. And it's all dealing with those issues, but a hyper local focus. So if you come to Thrive Cape Cod to hear about housing, you're going to hear it's not going to be useful to you if you're in Springfield, Massachusetts,
right?
Because you may find it interesting, and you're welcome to come. We don't have any problem with that, but it's going to be talking about a Cape context of housing, which is the housing problem on the Cape, as you know more as well as anybody else, is a very different housing problem than is in most places around New England. Right. And all of the solutions we'll be talking about at that will be Cape solutions. And Cape agencies and Cape ministries work in this space. But we'll deal with human trafficking at those, mental addiction, mental health, racial healing, disciple making, right? All the issues, because we want our communities to thrive, hence the name. And our communities are not going to thrive if our churches don't thrive. So we try and invest in both and thrive. And we'd love to do more thrives around New England, as you know. And so, and I can mention what we're doing around our Unleashing initiative to explain how we might be able to do more of that, as well as other stuff. We also have as a radio show and a podcast, which people are listening to right now.
Right on. Yeah, no, we could talk about Thrive all day, because I love Thrive. So I'm on the Cape, and it has been such a gift to our community to have churches connected in that way. And I love hearing, kind of just in one segment, everything that Vision New England is doing. Because Charles, I'm deeply involved in Vision New England, and I still don't know everything that we do because our network is so wide across the region, but also getting really deep in places too, which I think is pretty incredible. And kind of all of these just different iterations of how we're involved differently in different places too, a reflection of this whole rebirthing initiative of wanting to help the church in the region do what it does best by connecting people and accelerating what the good work that's already happening. So it's kind of fun to hear some of that stuff, which, to be honest, I don't know everything about.
Yeah, no. Well, you work for a living too, so right. I expect you're paying attention to some other stuff besides just us. And we do a lot of that connecting. So we're connecting people. You can go to our website, and there's all kinds of resources there. We put them in social media. There's an event calendar, career page, right? All those kinds of things. But I also do a lot of just people reaching out and saying, "Hey, can you help with?" Or who can you point me to? We have a church we're working with right now where I didn't know they had a long history with Vision New England, but they must, because they're having some issues and they need some help. And their bylaws say one of the organizations that they can go to outside the church for help is Vision New England.
Oh, no.
And so we're helping them, and we help other churches with training and equipping, mentoring, coaching. We've got a couple who do coaching and pastoral retreats for pastoral couples together. Okay. And so there's all kinds of things, but I get a lot of calls from last year. We had, it's a neat story. I got a call from a pastor on the Cape, in fact, who, because of Thrive Cape Cod, we knew each other. And he had a congregant who'd been up in New Hampshire, who'd gotten hurt, who was going to be in, I forget, in a care facility for 3 or 6 months, and knows no one. He said, "Is there anybody you can connect me to?" So I reached out to 3 or 4 pastors in the area. I said, "Hey guys, here's the situation." And one of the guys says, I drive by there every week on the way home. I'll stop in once a week and just sit and pray with the person, talk to them, visit. That's the power of being a network, or the power of being the body of Christ.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah. Charles, you mentioned a new initiative, the Unleashing the Power of Unity initiative. Did you want to add anything on that? Because that's
I will. It's a great conversation. It's something we're excited about and doing a lot of fundraising related to it. It's called Unleashing the Power of Unity. And so each year when we sit down with our association directors, we'd be hearing stuff for the last 5 years, or prior to last year, we'd hear, okay, I think I get the mission a little bit better, right? Or I think I figured out what you guys do, and right, because it's this learning process. Because everybody's got day jobs and they're not singularly focused on this. So it takes some time. And it takes, even once you hear it, takes some time to connect too and figure out what you mean or experience it. And but last year we heard from this group a very strong message across every single one of the groups, because we do these listening sessions with the directors and we do multiple ones. We heard it in every one. And that was the vision is right. The mission is spot on. You guys are executing really well. Can't believe how much you get done with so few resources. Don't screw it up. And we know you have no more bandwidth, but here's all the new things we want.
Tough request.
Right. And the 3 new things, and it's entirely logical and reasonable. We believe it's very spirit informed, but it was also logical, but they're much bigger steps up than I would do across all 3 at once, which is where the Holy Spirit comes in this, because I wouldn't do that. I'd do incremental change. Right. But what they said is the messaging that you're doing around disciple making, which is an area where the church has a weakness, but it's our primary mission. They said the messaging you've been doing, that has been our response to disciple making, is we don't have bandwidth to do much more than this, so we just message everywhere. If people listen to Church in Action, they've heard it, right? A disciple is the disciple making is the primary mission of the church. A disciple is somebody like Jesus, and God uses spiritual disciplines to transform us to be like Jesus. They said that is the right message. You're getting traction with it. Help us do it. Help us as pastors to grow ourselves spiritually, lay people to grow themselves spiritually, and help us both to make disciples. How do we grow other people spiritually? And so they said, that's right. Now help us do it. The second group said, hey, the things you do, like I talked about with the BMA or on Thrive Cape Cod or Farmington Valley, they said, we love that stuff. Do that all over New England. The third group said, or the third theme we heard out of it was, all of these affinity groups you have, we love that. And we want one for youth ministers, and we want one for New England church planters, and we want ones around issues, not just role affinity, but issue affinity. So we care about refugee resettlement, or we care about human trafficking or gentrification or other challenges facing the church. Help us with those. So that's 3 big new initiatives. And so we call the whole thing Unleashing the Power of Unity. The 3 different pieces are unleashing the power of disciple making, unleashing the power of relationship, unleashing the power of networks. And so what I told them we would do is we'd start raising money for 3 years of startup costs for that. That's $1.4 million. And so we're raising money for that right now. And so if anybody wants to give, you can go to visionnewengland.org and you'll see donate, and you'll be able to, you can become a member. You can click on that, or you can click on donate and designate it towards this Unleashing initiative. But the idea is we'll bring leaders on to tackle each one of those. And I've already brought on that disciple-making leader, Gina Mueller, who you know, who has led a national disciple-making ministry, who is now just focused on New England, which we love.
Yeah, I'm really excited about some of these initiatives, and it's cool to hear even how they have how this kind of fundraising effort was born by people asking. Because if you've got a situation where you're trying to create energy for something, it's usually a sign that something's off or something's dying. But when you've got people kind of excited about what's happening and then wanting more and more, God's doing something there, and personally, it's cool to be a part of, and it's exciting to see what might happen next. And on the disciple making effort too, I mean, we're seeing not just kind of in New England, but nationally, that this is a movement that is growing. People are noticing this is something that we have not been doing a great job of, that we need to lean into. And I think globally, I mean, at the Lausanne Congress, we were talking about in a secularism workshop about how disciple making is a challenge in secular communities around the world, not just in America and in New England. So it is really exciting to be a part of that through Vision New England. And I'm excited to see where this is.
And I agree. The thing I heard also, when we go back to those 100 people we first talked about, I heard so many of them say, I've been here 40 years. God is doing something different in New England. I've never seen this before. So there's absolutely, so as unchurched as we are, right, we're 2 to 4% evangelical, right? Again, using a theological definition of that term, that makes us, in most missionaries' minds, we're an unreached people group.
Yeah.
Right. So to think that our strategies and our approaches from 20 years ago, 50 years ago, they're just not. We need to approach New England like we are missionaries who are sent here, who need to understand the culture and figure out how to adapt and do evangelism while we're doing our day jobs, right? And build disciples in a way that we need to be looking at how missionaries do it, because we're in the mission field right here. But God's doing something in this mission field. And that's the really exciting part. And so we do get to be a great bird's eye view of all of that's going on. But what we often hear from both Thrives that we do, it's just so nice to know I'm not alone. It's so nice to know my church, because when you're 2%, you can feel alone some of the time. Yeah. And so it's nice to know my church is alone. It was just so nice to be with other believers. It was so nice to be with people, even though we don't agree on everything theologically, we agree on the fundamentals. And we were together, and we praised God, and we worked together. And what we see at Thrives, as you know, we've seen people start ministries after going to a Thrive. We've seen people record numbers of people for some ministries. People plug into to ministries through Thrive. And we find ministries that even though they're within an hour of each other, they just find each other for the first time, and they start working together and have an even bigger impact. So it's this. What I love about Thrive is the secret sauce is simple. We just put the problems of our people, of our communities, in front of the people of God, and He calls and convicts somebody to do something. And we see that over and over again. So the secret sauce is just the Holy Spirit and that, and it works. And so we don't go in saying, okay, let's make sure we get a foster care ministry out of this one. Let's make sure 100 people. It's very organic. It's like we're just going to create the space and let God do the calling and convicting.
Yeah, when people talk about Thrive Cape Cod and the way that it's connected churches and pastors in our region, I mean, they talk about it like a small miracle. to get people to collaborate in this way. I mean, churches that are neighbors, and to develop those friendships. And it has to be organic if it's going to be the kind of friendships that we're talking about. And what I love about that too is when we talk about one of the things that people love so much about Congress was the connection and seeing the church in one place, the inspiration that comes from that, and the encouragement that comes from that. And that's still happening, but just in a very different way in our region.
Yeah, because the issue of Congress is you and I could go to Congress and sit next to each other in a session and feel like we should be doing something. And then you're going to go down to Cape Cod. I'm going back to Connecticut. We'll never see each other again. Yeah. But if we're all within an hour of each other, we actually can respond to that. And the person who's speaking, I don't even have to come up with something. They just spoke. I'll go talk to them and I'll plug in. I can show up Tuesday and start doing something. And so the model of it, that hyper local focus, is really critical, I think, and we've seen just so much come out of it.
It's so good. Well, Charles, is there anything else that you wanted to add about Vision New England, its history, what it's doing today? Anything else that you want to add that we didn't get to touch on?
I would say for sure, I would ask folks to be praying for New England and for the work of Vision New England and all the partners and folks that are working with us. And I would ask them to step in and support us financially. And another great partner I should mention is Life Changing Radio, which airs this episode on 7 radio stations around New England. And they're just so gracious in doing that with us. And so I would pray for and listen to them as much as you can. I know some people are listening on podcasts, but pray for Life Changing Radio too.
Well, this has been great. Thank you so much, Charles, for this conversation. It's been enlightening for me, and I hope it's been enlightening for some of our listeners. So thank you so much.
Thanks. To me, it's fun. I love to talk about the history of Vision New England. Thanks for letting me, Brittney.
Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for serving. To support this program and accelerate evangelism, go to visionnewengland.org and click on Donate, or click Member to become a partner with us. This program is supported by the Palau Association, who are dedicated to proclaiming the good news, uniting the church, and impacting cities worldwide.
At Leadership Transformations, we believe that when you have the right resources to help you slow down and experience a deep and refreshing connection to God, you can become the discerning leader you know you are created to be. Friends, Steve Macchia here, and I have a free gift for your soul. It's called Pathways. Pathways is our weekly email aimed at offering you soul-nourishing content for the journey. It contains readings, prayers, spiritual practices, a link to the Discerning Leader podcast, as well as information about all of our upcoming soul care retreats, workshops, and online offerings. So head on over to leadershiptransformations.org today and sign up for this free resource. It will help you slow down and be more. God bless you, friends.